This videotape will help you with the routine maintenance and service of the Hamer Model 125 bag closer. Part 1 consists of troubleshooting problems you may have with your machine. Part 2 is the step-by-step assembly of the Model 125. The scenes and procedures in this video are intended for reference only and may vary slightly from those required for the Model 125 at your facility. Read the Model 125 instruction manual thoroughly before operating this machine. Disconnect electrical and air power before troubleshooting or performing maintenance or repair on this machine. Wear protective eyewear during maintenance, repair, or troubleshooting of the machine. Be sure all safety guards have been replaced before operating the machine. When a bag goes through your machine without forming a staple, there can be several causes. 1. The wire spool may be empty. 2. Wire may be tangled on the spool. 3. The wire spool nut may be too tight. 4. The wire feed lever may have slipped out of the lever stop, or it may be out of adjustment. To adjust, loosen the lever stop and turn the lever counterclockwise. Place a 5/1000 of an inch shim between the wire feed wheel and the wire tension bearing. Then tighten the lever stop, making sure not to move the lever. 5. The wire may be bent or kinked. Cut the wire, pull it out of the wire feed tube, and rethread it. And 6. The wire feed tube may be plugged with shavings. If your machine is producing deformed staples, there can be one of a number of different problems. If the staples are of unequal length, your wire feed lever may be out of adjustment. Adjust the lever as previously shown. If the staples are breaking at the bend, you may have a worn or damaged hook, double end die, or former. If the staples are bent back, this could be due to a lack of oil on the wire spool and the felt oiler. The spool should be oiled after every 4 hours of use. Deformed staples may also be caused when the wire feed wheel is clogged with chips, when the wire check is worn at the tip, when the wire check body is worn, or when the wire check spring is worn. To test the wire check, raise the feed lever and pull back on the wire. If you are able to pull the wire back, one or more parts may need replacement. Another cause of broken or deformed staples may be that the wire is hitting the hook as it is being fed into the machine. Bend the wire feed tube slightly, being careful not to crush the tube. This will allow the wire to feed into the machine. The wire may also hook to the left and cause jamming. Adjust the tube to allow proper feeding. If the wire is cutting off straight and not bending, your machine may have a worn or damaged hook spring. The hook spring is located under the left-hand feed plate. When checking for damage, look for cracks at the bends. Your problem may also be due to dirt in the slot under the hook spring or a piece of wire jammed under the hook. If your machine cycles without a bag or double trips, check to see that the drive pulley is set correctly. Loosen the set screw and raise or lower the pulley to maintain a 1/16 of an inch clearance between the bottom of the feed plate and the top of the feed belt. There should also be clearance between the limit switch rod and the feed belt. If not, adjust the actuating block to obtain clearance. If your machine is stalling in the middle of the cycle, the drive belt may be loose. To tighten, Loosen the 3 mounting bolts and adjust the motor to tighten the belt. Machine stalling may also be caused by the stationary cutter being out of adjustment. The moving cutter must slide over the stationary cutter. The stationary cutter must be flush with the edge of the cutter clamp. Troubleshooting and maintenance of clutch assemblies. This section will include 3 different clutch assemblies that have been used on the Model 125 from 1979 to the present. This section begins with the 2051-1 clutch assembly, which uses the one-shot power supply, part number 2052. The only clutches using the one-shot power supply are the 2051 and the 2051-1, which are easily identified with a black coil, number 2051A. If the actuator does not trip and the machine does not cycle, the problem is usually related to the one-shot, which is located inside the electrical box. Check to see that all of the wire connections are secure and that the wire coming from the limit switch is in place. Also check to see that the limit switch is not defective. A good indication that the one-shot is faulty is when there is little or no movement of the activator when the limit switch is engaged. Your machine also will not cycle if the clutch solenoid is faulty. If the clutch is stalling, it may need lubrication. Add oil to the felt oiler in the center of the flywheel regularly. The problem may also be caused by dirt in the clutch. Disassemble the clutch for cleaning. Disassembly and assembly of the clutch will be demonstrated shortly. If the packer arm and the former are not cycling when the clutch is engaged, the pin that attaches the clutch to the main shaft may be sheared. The problem may also be that the pin on the main shaft is sheared. Replace these parts if they are damaged. If the clutch does not drive the machine, but the input turns, a jam or overload may have broken or damaged the drive spring in the clutch. If the clutch jams and stalls the input motor, one of the spring tangs may be broken or damaged. In addition, check the clearance between the input hub and the output assembly. If there appears to be excessive wear, these parts should be replaced. This portion shows the proper disassembly, assembly, and adjustment of the 2051 clutch. To begin, mark the slots on the 2051E control collar where the upper and lower spring tangs are at. It is important to mark the springs in the correct slot to ensure proper adjustment later. Next, remove the upper and lower 2051D retaining rings. Now, slide the clutch assembly off the base and remove the 2051I anti-back spring from the 2051J brake hub. Then remove the 2051G input hub. Now remove the 2051E control collar and the lower 2051F brake spring together, and then remove the spring from the control collar. Now remove the 2051F drive spring from the 2051H output assembly. These are all the internal parts of the 2051 clutch. To assemble the clutch, insert the inner spring tang into the hole on the 2051H output assembly. Place the 2051E control collar over it. Make sure the spring tang is in the marked slot. Slide the control collar down slightly and place the inside tang on the upper drive spring in the hole on the output assembly. Install the 2051I anti-back spring into the brake hub, then place the clutch assembly onto the brake hub. Make sure the springs are in the correct slots. Install the 2051G input hub onto the clutch assembly. If the springs are placed into the correct slots, the cam should jump 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch. Install the snap rings. Always make sure the 2051H output assembly is in the full brake position when checking the cam jump adjustment. Also, make sure the output assembly is in its full brake position before releasing the actuator stop. This section will deal with the two newest clutch assemblies, the 2051-4 and the 2051-6. The 2051-4 is designed with fewer parts and for easier maintenance. This section will deal with troubleshooting of the 2051-4 clutch. If the clutch fails to trip or continues to cycle, the 2051-2M spring may be broken where it connects to the 2051-2S. To prevent this problem, you may need to deburr any sharp edges on the 2051-2S. There may also be a burr on the 2051-2A, which may need to be removed. If the clutch fails to trip, the 2051-2AC may be broken or loose at this point. Remove and replace the 2051-2AC. If the machine continues to cycle, the 2051-2B may be sticking open. It may be necessary to clean and lubricate the 2051-2B. This section will demonstrate the disassembly and assembly of the 2051ZA clutch unit. First, remove the lower 2051D snap ring and remove the assembly from the plate. Next, remove the 2051-4E control collar assembly. Now, remove the 2051F spring being careful not to stretch or damage the spring. Also, remove the shim spacer from the hub. Next, remove the upper 2051D snap ring and slide the 2051G hub from the 2051-4H output assembly. This completes the disassembly of the 2051ZA clutch unit. Check the spring for broken or bent tangs. Also, check that the spring is not stretched. If the machine is stalling in mid-cycle, the spring may appear normal but may have become weak. To reassemble, first place the 2051-4G hub onto the 2051-4H output assembly. Next, replace the 2051D upper snap ring. Then replace the shim. Next, replace the 2051F spring, making sure the spring tang fits securely into the hole on the output assembly. Now install the 2051-4E so the spring tang aligns with the slot in the collar. Then install on the plate assembly. Next, replace the 2051D lower snap ring. This completes the disassembly and assembly of the 2051ZA clutch unit. This section deals with troubleshooting of the 2051-6 clutch. This clutch assembly consists of the following parts: the 2051-3A coil, the 2051-3S trip plunger, the 2051-3N trip plunger return spring, the 2051-3M clutch actuator lever spring, the 2051-2B actuator lever, and the 2051-3K clutch plate. The 2051ZA clutch unit is also used on the 2051-6 assembly. For proper operation, the 2873 roll pin should be in a vertical position, as shown here. If the trip plunger wears out on one side, it can be rotated in order to use the other side. Depress the plunger into the coil and hold it in this position while removing the spring from the pin. Rotate the plunger 1/2 turn and replace the spring on the pin. To replace the spring inside the trip plunger, push the plunger into the coil and remove the spring from the pin. Next, it may be necessary to remove the coil from the plate in order to remove the plunger assembly. Remove the 2 mounting screws beneath the coil. Push the spring into the plunger and rotate it until it disconnects from the roll pin. Then remove it from the plunger. To replace the spring, insert the long end of the spring into the plunger and rotate it until it hooks securely around the roll pin, as shown here. Next, attach the short end of the spring to the pin. Slide the plunger assembly back into the coil and install the mounting screws. To begin, press one 2025 main bearing onto the 2021 main shaft. Using a pressing fixture, press this assembly onto the 2002 gear housing. Using a spacing fixture, leave 50 thousandths of an inch above the surface at the gear end of the 2002. Next, press another 2025 main bearing flush onto the opposite side of the 2002. Now press the 2001 main casting onto the guide pins of the 2002 assembly and bolt it down. Grease the 2021 gear. Pin the 2044 wire feed shaft and 2045 wire feed gear together, making sure the hub on the 2045 is toward the threaded end of the 2044. Grease and install the 2006 front plate. Mount the 2017 wire feed wheel onto the 2044. The number on the 2017 should be facing out. Notice that the 2017 and 2044 are keyed. This is to ensure that the 2017 will stay timed with the gears. Bolt securely. Install the 2018 bearing on the 2094 idler shaft and secure it with a 3/8 inch snap ring. Notice the machined flat on the 2094. This should be aligned with the set screw on the 2095 eccentric plug. Tighten the set screw. Grease the bearing end of the 2095 and install it into the 2006. Grease the 2095 and install the 2100 idler gear with the hub toward the 2006. Grease both gears. Turn the main shaft until the pin center is just below the center line and install the 2006 assembly. Align the timing marks on the 2006 and 2017. It may be necessary to turn the 2021 slightly to allow the gears to mesh properly. When properly timed, there should be 11/32 of an inch between the 2006 and the center of the 2021 pin. Now that the machine is properly timed, secure the 2006. Bolt the 2030 wire check to the 2019 wire check body with the 2122 wire check shoulder bolt. Insert the end of the 2078 wire check spring into the 2030. Mount the wire check assembly to the 2006 with the 2716 machine screw. Place the other end of the 2078 around the 2081 wire check pin. Grease and assemble the 2008 former, 2011 driver, 2012 driver shoe with the 2658 roll pin. Tap the pin in, making sure the bevel on the end of the 2011 is up. Install the two 2014 brass links, making sure the beveled portion is up. Grease and align them to allow proper matchup with the 2021 pin. Now grease the slide areas on the main assembly and install the former assembly. Note the two holes on the 2008. These are to allow grease to get to the bottom. Install the 2063 Packer arm stud into the 2016 former guide plate. Make sure the dimple on the 2063 lines up with the set screw on the 2016 and tighten it down. Bolt the 2015 side plate to the 2016. Bolt the 2048 rear guide plate to the 2015. Now bolt this assembly onto the main unit. Cycle the machine halfway through by turning the 2021 main gear shaft. Note that the 2010 moving cutter has two cutting edges. Install the 2010. Note that the 2032 stationary cutter has four cutting edges. Install the 2032. Hold the 2032 securely against the 2010 and install the 2023 stationary cutter clamp. Bolt this assembly down. Make sure the 2032 and 2023 are flush and tight against the 2010 so the 2010 will slide without jamming. Install the 2075 die adjusting block and the 2080 double end die stop. Now install the 2033 double end die. Note that the 2033 is slotted for adjustment of staple tightness, and there are grooves on each end so that it can be reversed if worn or damaged. Note that the bolt in the 2075 is for adjusting the 2033. Bolt the 2103 bag stop and the 2033 to the main casting. The 2103 is slotted to allow adjustment for smaller or larger bags. Tighten down the bolt on the 2103 and also tighten the lock nut on the die adjusting bolt. Install the 2079 wire tube holder. Next, install the 2029 wire feed tube, making sure the end goes into the 2023. Take the other end and insert it into the 2006 and install a 5/16 24 set screw, making sure not to crush the 2029. Install the 2112 wire stop. Next, install the 2006 front plate and the 2043 guide shoe. Grease the 2063 Packer arm stud and slide the 2020 Packer arm onto the 2063. Before installing the 2065-1 Packer arm roller, grease the slot in the 2020 and the 2008 pin. Use the 2064-1 Packer arm roller washer and the 2790 lock screw and tighten the roller down. Install the 2101 set collar and the 2026 Packer die. Now install the 2121 Packer arm return spring. This has been added to prevent clutch and Packer arm override, which would obstruct the path of the bag entering the feed system. Next, install the 2036 wire spool bracket. Install the 2123 spring plunger. Tighten it until it is snug against the 2095, then back off a quarter turn. Install the 2115 wire feed lever into the 2095, making sure you start at the thin-walled side of the 2095. Now perform the wire tension adjustment. The adjustment between the 2017 and the 2018 should be 5/1000ths of an inch. This is done by placing a 5/1000ths inch shim between the 2017 and 2018 and moving the 2115 counterclockwise until there is slight pressure against the shim. Then remove the shim. Be careful not to move the preset 2115 wire feed lever. Lock it down with the 2116 lever stop in one of the 3 holes. The new style 2028 pivot pin is not threaded into the main casting. The correct installation is as follows. Install the pivot pin into the main casting and through the hook. Tighten the flathead Allen screws on the 2048 rear guide plate. The machined slot on the rear guide plate will hold the pivot pin in place. Install the 2027 clutch mounting foot. Install the 2051 clutch on the 2021 main shaft. Align the holes with a 3/16 inch pin punch and tap the roll pin slightly. Now, with pressure applied from the opposite side, tap the roll pin in until it is flush. Applying pressure on the other side of the 2051 will help keep the pounding of the pin from damaging the 2025 main bearings. The adjustment of the neutral position of the machine is done by turning the 2051 until the timing marks on the 2017 and the 2006 line up as shown by the pointer. Lift the retaining ring on the cam. Lift the cam and turn it until it is against the actuator stop. Slide the cam and the retaining ring down. The 2124-1 jack shaft assembly consists of the following parts. 1 2076-1 shaft, 2 3576 bearings, 1 2124A casting, and 1 2505 snap ring. Begin assembly of the jack shaft unit by pressing one of the 3576 bearings into the 2124A casting until it is flush with the surface. Turn the casting over and press the other 3576 bearing into the other end of the casting. Next, take the 2076-1 shaft and the 2505 snap ring and slide the snap ring over the machined end of the shaft until the ring fits securely into the groove on the shaft. Next, press the shaft into the casting so the snap ring end of the shaft is pointing up and the long end of the casting is also pointing up, as shown here. Next, install the 2087 upper V-pulley and the 2083 lower V-pulley onto the 2076-1 jack shaft. Install the 2083 lower V-pulley and tighten the set screw. Now bolt the jack shaft assembly to the gear housing. Place the 2099 feed belt on the upper V-pulley and mount the 2003 flywheel. On earlier Model 125s, where 2022 bearings are used, lift the upper V-pulley, leaving clearance for the flywheel, and tighten the 4 set screws. With newer style 2124-1 jack shaft assemblies, no adjustment of the shaft is required. To start the assembly of the feed system, place the 4 2579 spacer washers on the 2070 and 2071 feed plates. Then place the pulleys on the washers and bolt them down with the 2086 feed system pulley bolts. Install the 2109-2 spacer block and 2111 idler bearing assembly with the 2758 flathead bolts. Also, insert the 2111-1 take-up bearing into the slot on the 2070 and hand tighten the bolt. Note that the 2745 roll pin is 1/16 inch out from the 2070 feed plate so that it can hold the 2035 hook spring in place. Put the 2035 hook spring in the slot of the main casting. Place the 2099-5 feed belt around the 2083 and 2084 pulleys, making sure the 2111-1 is on the outside of the 2099-5. Mount the 2070 assembly onto the locating pins and press it down. Tighten the 2699 flathead bolts. You will notice another hold-down bolt has been added to eliminate the possible rising of the 2070. Install the 2071 assembly, making sure the 2105 is pressing against the 2109-2 spacer block. Install the 2062 shoulder bolt, making sure the plate does not bind. If it does, the 2062 should be backed off slightly. Tighten the 2111-1. Adjust the 2083 lower V pulley up or down as needed to achieve a 3/32 inch clearance between the belt and the plate. Install the 2147 shoulder bolt and 2148 spring washer through the feed plate into the 2109-2 pivot block and then tighten. Install the lock set screw opposite the 2062 shoulder bolt. Note how the feed system operates after being properly assembled. To install the wire spool, place the 2039 wire spool spring onto the 2036 wire spool bracket. Install the wire spool and the 2041 wire spool washer, noting that the washer is keyed to prevent the 2038 wire spool nut from coming off the bracket. Install and tighten the 2038 just enough so the wire will not unravel. To thread the machine, feed the wire through the 2114 flex tube. Using a needle nose plier, feed the wire into the 2029 wire feed tube, place the wire behind the wire check, and pull on the wire to make sure it does not slip. Now, lock down the 2115 wire feed lever. Note the proper wire feed operation. Note the functions of raising and lowering the machine on its pedestal. Also note the 2091 angle tube adjusting stops, which allow it to be adjusted to a preferred angle. Thank you for taking the time to watch this instructional videotape on the Hamer Model 125 bag closer. We hope it has been beneficial.